Jill Reedy speaks on a video call with Edwina Wambogo and Kirsten Herrick, who have their cameras on. Jamie Gosh and Rachel Elizabeth Walker appear as headshot photos, and other participants, Amanda, Krisha Thiagaraja, Narissa McCarty, CLRN, Linda, Krista Murphy, Jody Mattel, Seven Rebecca Lucas, Valerie Sullivan, Sarah Bohm, Emily Tarleton, Marianne, Andrea Lubina, and Deepesh Pandey appear as black tiles with names in white.
Dr. Herrick, and she's going to be speaking on dietary intake assessment using ASA 24. I'm going to give a brief introduction before, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Wambogo. Dr. Edwina Wambogo is a nutritional epidemiologist at the Office of Dietary Supplements in the ODS Population Studies program. Her work focuses on dietary assessment, assessing dietary patterns, child nutrition, and nutrition in aging, as well as using data from health surveys and epidemiological studies. Prior to joining ODS, she worked as a nutritional epidemiologist at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention National Center for Health Statistics. Sorry, there's a helicopter going overhead. In the Division of National Health and Nutrition Examination Surveys. She supported external researchers who are using NHANES data through the revision of the NHANES tutorial and supported the creation of NHANES data visualization tool. While at CDC, she continued to work closely with colleagues at NIH to characterize dietary intake and dietary behaviors of the U.S. population. And she also provided service to the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee while she was working at the National Cancer Institute. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Edwina Wambogo. Thank you. And
Thank you for that introduction, Jill. It's always nice to see people you've worked with for a long time. So thank you. Let me share my screen.
Dr. Wambogo shares her screen and opens a presentation. The first slide reads, Mary Frances Picciano Dietary Supplement Research Practicum. Dietary Supplement Assessment Methods. Edwina Wambogo, Ph.D., M.S., M.Ph., R.D. Office of Dietary Supplements. May 22 to 24, 2023. NIH. National Institutes of Health. Office of Dietary Supplements.
Can you see my screen yet?
Yes, looks great.
All right. So thank you again for that introduction.
Dr. Wambogo goes to the next slide, entitled, Objectives.
This presentation will describe the methodologies employed in dietary assessment in terms of dietary supplements, and there is the respect to their strengths and weaknesses. I will go over this very briefly because Dr. Cohen talked a little bit about this yesterday, and then I will describe the considerations in the collection of the data, and then provide an overview of the enhanced dietary supplement data collection process. I will also not talk about this that much because Dr. Cohen talked about it yesterday. I will talk a little bit about the available validation studies for dietary supplement assessment methods as an addition to this presentation today.
Dr. Wambogo flips to a slide showing the Dietary Guidelines for Americans, 2020 to 2025. The left side shows photos of a toddler raising a spoon to his mouth, a woman smiling at her pregnant belly, and a man and girl preparing food. The right side displays the text of the guidelines. Under the heading, Dietary Guidelines for Americans, what it is not, Dr. Wambogo circles a portion of the body text.
I wanted to look at what the dietary guidelines say about dietary supplements, especially because this is very important for us in the nutrition field. And this is what the dietary guidelines of 2020-2025 say about the place of dietary supplements within the context of total healthful diets, that in some cases, dietary supplements are useful when it is not possible to meet nutrient needs from other sources, like during pregnancy.
She switches to a slide entitled, Why Collect Dietary Supplement Data?
So outside of what the dietary guidelines say about the place of dietary supplements, from all the presentations that we have had, especially from Dr. Johanna Dwyer and from Dr. Cohen yesterday, we know that the prevalence of supplements use is high in the US and has increased over time. And therefore, when we are looking at total nutrient intakes, it's very important that we account for them. And as Dr. Cohen was saying, if we do not include the nutrients that come from these dietary supplements, we are likely to overestimate inadequacies of intake And we are also unlikely to underestimate the intakes that are above the upper intake levels when we are looking at population level intakes. And when we are looking at usual intakes, which is of importance for those of us who are looking at health-related outcomes, it is important to account for this because some intakes from both sources, that is foods and beverages plus supplements, can be quite high. And therefore, we need to account for this. Now, even though Dr. Cohen and Dr. Dwyer yesterday talked a little bit about the prevalence of use of dietary supplements and trends a little bit, I still wanted to look at it a little bit today for some population groups.
The next slide reads, overall, 34% of children and adolescents ages less than 19 years used at least one dietary supplement in past 30 days, US 2017 to 2018. A bar graph on the slide shows different age groups along the x-axis and percentage on the y-axis. It shows 34.0% of the total group, 21.8% for children under 2, 43.3% for children 2 to 5, 37.5% for children 6 to 11, and 29.7% for those 12 to 19. Text beneath the chart reads, 1 significantly different, p less than 0.05, from age group less than 2 years. 2 significantly different, p less than 0.05, from age group 2 to 5 years. 3 significantly different, p less than 0.05, from age group 6 to 11 years. Steyerman B., Mishra S., Gush J.J., Petishman N., Hale C.M. Dietary supplement use in children and adolescents age less than 19 years, United States, 2017 to 2018. MMWR Mortally Rep. 2020 6943, 1557 to 1562.
And this recent study from NCHS among youth 19 years and younger looked at the prevalence of use of dietary supplements in the past 30 days in 2017-18. This is the latest data that is available. And for this population group, the prevalence of use of at least one dietary supplement in the past 30 days was 34%. The prevalence was lower for infants and toddlers less than 2 years of age, and was higher for this age group, 2 to 5 years old, the preschoolers. And then it declined into adolescents. I was very curious about this from my experience with my own children when they were at this age group. I wanted to see what the youth report for the reasons why they use dietary supplements, or what their proxies report for the users of the dietary supplements.
The next slide is entitled, The Most Reported Reason for Dietary Supplement Use in Youth in 2007 to 2010 was to Improve Health. A table on the slide is entitled, Table 3. Prevalence, Percentage, SE, of specific types of dietary supplements and the most frequently reported motivation for use of product type in children, less than or equal to 19 years of age, in the United States, 2007 to 2010. The table lists different types of supplements, the prevalence of children users, prevalence of users, and most common reported motivation. The MVM and multivitamin rows of the table highlight, showing the most common reported motivation of, to improve overall health. Vitamin C highlights, with the most common reported motivation of, to boost immune system and prevent colds. An attribution below the table reads, Bailey R.L., Gush J.J., Thomas P.R., Dwyer J.T. Why U.S. children use dietary supplements.
And for those who use multivitamin or mineral supplements or multivitamin supplements alone, the main reasons that they reported was to improve overall health. And those who use vitamin C supplements was to boost their immune system and prevent colds, which makes sense. If you have a child of this age group, we are probably all at some point thought of using supplements for these particular reasons.
A bar chart is entitled, Figure 1. Percentage of adults age 20 and over who used any dietary supplement, by sex and age, United States, 2017 to 2018. The chart shows men, women, and all, divided into 4 age groups, with percentage on the y-axis. The 20 and over bars highlight on the chart, with 57.6% for all, 50.8% for men, and 63.8% for women.
Now, this data from the same cycle, 2017-2018, for adults ages 20 years and over, showed that 57% of adults use at least one dietary supplement in the past 30 days. The prevalence of use was higher for women compared to men at 63.8% compared to 50.8%. And this pattern of sex differences in supplement use has been shown in Enhanced from the time they started collecting dietary supplements. I think one other thing that I wanted to highlight was the fact that the use of dietary supplements increased with age overall, and for men and for women, as you can see.
Arrows appear on all three sections of the bar graph, illustrating that the bars lengthen as age increases from the 20 to 39 group to the 60 and over group. For the 60 and over age group, the percentage for all is 74.3%, the percentage for men is 67.3%, and the percentage for women is 80.2%. An attribution below the table reads, Mishra, S., Steierman, B., Gosh, J.J., Petitschmann, and dietary supplement use among adults, United States, 2017 to 2018. Dr. Wambogo switches to the next slide, which reads, Prevalence of use increased for any supplement among youth ages 12 to 19 years. Another bar chart appears on the slide, titled, Use of any dietary supplement.
Now, in terms of looking at the trends of use of dietary supplements, this one study looked at the trends of use among children or youth and adolescents, that is children and adolescents up to age 19 years of age. And it's from 2009 through 2017-18. And the finding that was for the use of any dietary supplement, the prevalence of use increased for the ages 12 to 19 years of age. And the prevalence of use of 2 or more supplements increased for the ages 2 to 5 and 12 to 19 between 2009-10 and 2017-18 in the US.
Dr. Wambogo pastes another bar chart to the slide, titled, Use of 2 or more dietary supplements. Both charts compare use among young age groups across different years, from 2009 to 2018, with percentage on the y-axis. The 12 to 90 group highlights on both charts, showing an increase over the years. The 2 to 5 age group also highlights on the 2 or more chart, showing a general increase from 2011 to 2016. An attribution reads, Steierman B., Mishra S., Gush J.J., Petitschmann N., Hale C.M. Dietary supplement use in children and adolescents aged less than 19 years, United States, 2017 to 2018.
Now, you remember the talk about the use of multiple supplements, and we will come to it later. So it happens also among children, not just among adults.
A graph on the next slide is entitled, Figure 4. Trends in age-adjusted percentage of adults age 20 and over who used any dietary supplement, United States, 2007 to 2008 through 2017 to 2018. Survey periods and years are listed on the x-axis and percentage on the y-axis. 4 different lines on the graph correspond to different adult age groups and show slight increases over time. An attribution reads, Mishra, S., Steierman, B., Gosh, G., Petitschmann, and dietary supplement use among adults, United States, 2017 to 2018.
In terms of adults, the prevalence of use also increased between 2007-8 to 2017-18 from 48% to 56% overall for those 20 years and over. And when this was looked at for the different age groups among adults, also the prevalence had increased in that same time period.
The next slide reads, over half of adults ages 60 plus years used 2 or more supplements in the past 30 days, US 2017 to 2018. A segmented bar chart on the slide is entitled, Figure 2. Number of dietary supplements used by adults age 20 and over, by age, United States, 2017 to 2018. Bars on the chart correspond to different adult age groups and are divided to show the percentage of each group that used 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4 or more supplements. The segments corresponding to 0 supplements are largest for each age group, particularly those 20 to 39. The age group with the largest segment for 4 or more supplements is the 60 and over group. An attribution reads, Mishra, S., Steierman, B., Gosh, G., Petitschmann, and dietary supplement use among adults, United States, 2017 to 2018.
Now, in terms of the issue of stacking that Dr. Johanna Dwyer was talking about, this is among adults, and I was just talking about the ones among children. This same time period in 2017-18, when this study looks at the adults, the number of supplements that adults 20 years and over use in a given day in the past 30 days, almost 1/3 reported using more than 1 supplement, 2 or more, that is, and almost 14% reported using 4 or more supplements in a given day.
The segments corresponding to 2, 3, and 4 or more supplements for the 20 and over age group highlight 13.8% for 2, 7.5% for 3, and 13.8% for 4 or more. An arrow appears on a graph, illustrating how the segments corresponding to supplement use increase with age.
And the prevalence of using several supplements in a given day increase with age. Now, if you think about this age group of 60 years and over, and you think about the number of many other medications that they use, we know that this is important. And also, if you're using more than one supplement, then we can imagine the amount of nutrients that you might be getting overall from all the supplements that are being used. And therefore, it's important to account for them.
The next slide reads, how then are dietary supplement data collected? The Journal of Nutrition Critical Review. Best practices for dietary supplement assessment and estimation of total usual nutrient intakes in population-level research and monitoring.
Now we say that there is really no standardized way to look at the prevalence of use of supplements or the nutrients that are obtained from them. Nevertheless, as Dr. Cohen was saying yesterday, long-term intake instruments have been used to assess supplement use. That is frequency-based questionnaires or screeners. And short-term intake instruments have also been used, in particular 24-hour recalls. Food diaries or food records have also been used. And supplement inventories are used either alone or in combination with these other instruments. I like this NCI tool that kind of gives a breakdown on what you should be considering when you're looking at the different assessment methods. It is focused on foods and beverages, but it actually also applies to supplements also.
The top of a web page reads, NIH, National Cancer Institute. Dietary Assessment Primer. Below a menu near the top, a heading on the page reads, Comparing Dietary Assessment Instruments.
Some of the factors that this tool talks about include the research question and scope of interest. For instance, are you looking at total intake or just interested in some nutrients? Would you be choosing an FFQ, for instance, versus a screener in that case? The study design and the time frame of interest. Are you interested in an intake on a given day? Are you looking at what has been consumed in the past? Is it a prospective study or an interventional study? Then you think about the sample characteristics in terms of how long your questionnaire is, what you're expecting in terms of completion time, the memory requirements, how difficult it is cognitively. And then, of course, you have to think about the measurement error that is associated with the tool itself. We have heard a lot about measurement error when we think about 24-hour recalls or FFQs in terms of food and beverages assessment, and they also apply to dietary supplements.
The next slide is entitled, Strengths and Weaknesses of Methods. It compares 24-hour recall, records/diaries, and FQQs/screeners.
Now, 24-hour recalls can have been used, as I said, mostly for capturing dietary supplement intake. And the online tools actually allow for the collection and coding of all the reported dietary supplements in a very nice way, like the ASA 24 does that very nicely. And we know that 24-hour recalls generally capture very rich contextual details, and they are of low cognitive burden for participants. Nevertheless, in terms of dietary supplements, they are unlikely to capture those that are consumed episodically. And also because the participants generally will not bring the bottles of the supplements that they're using. They may not remember all the details of those supplements. And therefore, as a researcher, you may be forced to assign some default values to those. So when you're looking at the nutrients themselves, then you might likely not get the right values in. Also, there is a time burden to consider, because for the most times, the 24-hour recalls collect the dietary supplement data in conjunction with foods and beverages, so it may take a long time to complete. I said that the food records and food diaries have not been used that often to look at dietary supplements intake data. Nevertheless, if they are used, they collect data in real time, and therefore they are very, they would be more, what do you say, they collect data, so they're more accurate because they're collecting the data in real time. But they would be, if you think about it, they're more costly in terms of time and labor. You have to record everything as you're consuming, so it's a little bit difficult sometimes. And they are also unlikely to capture episodically consumed supplements. But also in terms of supplements, we always think about how people react when you're looking at them and they're reporting what they're consuming. They change their behaviors. This is also applies to dietary supplements. We know that dietary supplements are generally not consumed For instance, if it's a prescription supplement, someone may not consume it as is required, or they may change the dosage, they may skip supplements on given days. But if someone is recording it, is asking them to record this, then they may change their behaviors based on that also. In terms of the food frequency questionnaires, they are mostly used in large studies, large epidemiological studies. They may just ask for foods and beverages, but some of them also ask for supplements in there. This is because they are the most cost-effective tools for large studies, and they will collect data on usual intake straight up, so you don't have to worry about the complex statistical methods. Those of us who have tried them know how difficult they can be. And so you just get the usual intakes that you can use to look at the disease nutrient intake associations. And also they capture episodic use of supplements, so they are useful in that sense. Nevertheless, the FFQs that have been used in the US have been very varied in how they're constructed. And so comparing those results is very difficult. Also, if you're thinking of constructing an FFQ, and you think about what Dr. Diana Dwyer was talking about, for instance, yesterday, about the label database that we have at ODS, that is a product of both the USDA and the ODS. You look at the number of supplements or the number of products that are in the market. It is impossible to have all those products in your FFQ. You can only put in a few. So depending on the population that you're looking at, depending on what type of supplements that they use, the products that they use, you may miss some of them. And also FFQs can be quite cognitively difficult because of the time frame that you're looking at or the questions that you include.
Continuing the strengths and weaknesses of methods topic, the next slide lists the strengths and limitations of inventories.
Now I just say that the supplement inventories can be used alone or in conjunction with the other instruments. And they are generally very accurate and they collect very detailed information because you're looking at the product label. Nevertheless, they are very costly and time and labor intensive. And depending on where you're collecting them, if you're collecting them in the home, fine, but sometimes those products don't even exist anyway. But if you ask if you're collecting it outside the home and you're asking your participants to bring the bottles or bring the labels, they may forget to bring them.
The next slide reads, NHANES, the nation's mobile health survey. In the NHANES logo, the bottom line of an apple resembles a reading from an EKG machine.
I will briefly look at the enhanced methodology for dietary supplement data collection just to make you recall what was discussed yesterday.
The NHANES logo appears on a map of the United States. Text around the logo reads, multi-stage, probability sampling. Nationally representative. On a graphic, 6 small red squares dot a purple U.S. map. The map is labeled, Stage 1, Counties. A magnification over a 7th square shows a group of identical houses. It's labeled, Stage 2, Segments. A magnification over a house shows a family of 4. This is labeled, Stage 4, Participants. A portion of the graphic is covered by a list of participants on the video call.
The National Center for Health Statistics is responsible for the enhanced survey methodology and the data collection activities. This is a complex multi-stage probability sample survey of a national representative sample of the US population.
On the next slide, a crowd of cartoon people faces outward. New text appears around the NHANES logo that reads, cross-sectional, and 2-year cycles.
It is a cross-sectional survey, nevertheless, of non-institutionalized populations in the US. The data is collected and released in 2-year cycles from about 10,000 participants every year. At least up to this point, it has been that way. It may change in the near future.
On the next slide, a woman takes notes while talking to a smiling man on a sofa. New text appears around the NHANES logo that reads, in-home interview, and
Enhance has been conducted in 2 major parts. There is an in-home interview through some questionnaires.
On the next slide, white trailers make up the mobile examination center. New text around the logo reads, exam/labs at mobile examination center.
And then participants go to the mobile examination center where they have follow-up exams and they have lab sample collection, and then the first 24-hour recall is collected at this mobile examination center.
Text, NHANES overview. Segments of an umbrella are labeled, biochemical measures, anthropometry, dietary intake, dietary supplements, physical activity. A rightward arrow below the umbrella reads NHES1, NHES2, and NHES3 at one end, then reads NHANES1, NHANES2, HHANES, NHANES3, and continuous NHANES from left to right. Text around the umbrella reads, audiometry, demographics, food security, medical and health, RX use, oral health, sexual and reproductive health, environmental exposure, tobacco use, housing, consumer behavior, dermatology, taste and smell, hospitalization, sleep disorders, respiratory, infectious diseases.
There is a wealth of information that comes from enhanced data, and that's what makes it very attractive for users of this data. The survey has been running for a long time, since 1959, and in 1971, the dietary component was added. Now you can see this umbrella shows all the dietary-related components that have been collected in enhanced continuously. And I just wanted to mention that ODS has been funding the dietary supplement component since 1999, the continuous enhance, and also has funded the collection of several biomarkers since then.
The next slide reads, data collection, interviews and physical exams. In photos, a younger woman shows a senior woman the badge on her lanyard. Next, she sits with the senior woman at a table with a laptop. The older woman holds one of the 4 bottles in front of her.
As I said, dietary data is collected in 3 parts in Enhance. The first part is in the in-person home interview. Here, demographic data is collected together with health history, lifestyle, and behavioral questions are asked in this in-home interview. And also the 30-day dietary supplement use is asked here, plus the supplement inventory is collected here.
The next slide reads, 30-day dietary supplement data are collected during the in-home interview, since NONS 3 in person, in the homes of survey participants. Use of all dietary supplements, including antacids and herbals, in the past 30 days.
Since 1999, participants are asked to report all the supplements that they consume, including botanicals and acids also. They are shown a handcard that shows them samples of dietary supplements and the categories that they belong to, including antacids. And if they say they consume any of those kind of products, then they are asked to show them the bottles. And if they cannot show those bottles, then they just report them verbally, and then they are entered into the system.
The next slide reads, Dietary Supplements Assessment Visual Aids, Hand Cards. One card reads, Picture examples of dietary supplements, and has a photo of different containers of pills and chews. The next card reads, Examples of dietary supplements. It has a table listing examples of different categories of dietary supplement, like fiber, amino acids, and others. The last card reads, Examples of antacids. Tums, Rolaids, Maalox, Mylanta.
These are some of those handcards that I was talking about that I used in Enhance. So you see the bottles of supplements, they are shown those samples, and then they are shown the different categories that those supplements would belong to, and also examples of antacids.
In a photo on the next slide, a woman types on a computer in the mobile exam center. Text, data collection, interviews and physical exams. 1. In-person home interview. Demographics. Health history, lifestyle and behavioral questionnaires. 30-day dietary supplement use and inventory. 2. Mobile exam centers. Physical exam measurements, for example, anthropometry, blood pressure. Lab specimen collection. 24-hour dietary recall, foods, beverages and dietary supplements.
After that, in-person interview, participants are then asked to go to the mobile examination centers. This is where physical examination measurements are taken, lab specimens are collected, and the first 24-hour recall is collected here. Now, this first 24-hour recall combines the foods and beverages and also the dietary supplements consumed in the past 24 hours. What is interesting is that in Enhance, because they've already reported the supplements at the home, that list comes down with them to the mobile examination center. So they are asked to report if they consume those same supplements that they are already reported in the FFQ and in the inventory, and any new supplements that they consume in that past 24 hours.
In a photo on the next slide, a woman sits in front of a computer, looking at a photo of food in her hands.
After that, there's a post-exam that happens also in Enhance on the phone, over the phone, 3 to 10 days later. This has been a staple of Enhance and can change. But in Enhance, the second 24-hour recall is collected at that point. Also, for this same recall, it is a combination of foods and beverages and dietary supplements and antacids, which are queried individually. For this one also, the follow-up, that list is still in existence from the FFQ and the inventory, and they asked if they consumed any of those supplements that they had reported and any new supplements that they consumed in the past 24 hours.
The next slide reads, The Journal of Nutrition. Nutritional Epidemiology. Comparison of 4 methods to assess the prevalence of use and estimates of nutrient intakes from dietary supplements among U.S. adults.
Now, since Enhance uses these multiple methods that I've just talked about to assess dietary supplement use, it is possible to compare those methods using this data. And this is what the study by Ko and et al. Just did. So they looked at they created 4 different methods of measuring dietary supplements using the 2 different methods that are used in Enhance. Actually, there are 3 methods, but because they combine the inventory with the FFQ and the 24-hour recall, we can say there are 2 methods here. And then they were looking at the most appropriate method for looking at the prevalence of use and estimating nutrient intakes from those different methods.
A table on the next slide is entitled, Table 1. Estimated prevalence, % of use of specified types of DSs and antacids among U.S. adult aged equal or greater to 19 years, supplements by method, NHANES 2011 to 2014. The table compares estimated prevalence between methods DSMQ, 24-hour day, 24-hour mean, and DSMQ or at least 24-hour. The MVM and vitamin D rows highlight, showing similar values across methods.
They found that overall the methods were consistent in determining what the most commonly used supplements were, and in this case also multivitamin mineral supplements. And for the single nutrient supplement, that was vitamin D.
A table on the next slide is titled, Table 2, Estimated percentages of U.S. adult, aged equal to or greater than 19 years, DS users in Analytic Sample 3 taking selected nutrients from any, blank, MVM, by method, NHANES 2011 to 2014. Part of the title is cut off. The table compares percentages for riboflavin, vitamin D, folate, magnesium and calcium across different methods.
And in terms of the likelihood of reporting consuming a supplement, the participants are more likely to report using a supplement using the FFQ compared to the 24-hour recall. And they were even more likely to report using a supplement when they combined the FFQ and at least one dietary supplement.
The rows for any DS, DSMQ only, 24-hour day 1 only, and DSMQ or at least one 24-hour highlight. The values for DSMQ or at least one 24-hour are consistently higher than the other 2 methods.
And the results were consistent when they looked at the multivitamin mineral supplements.
The next slide displays tables 1 and 2, along with a bar chart that compares methods, with prevalence of DS use on the y-axis. The bar for DSMQ or at least one 24-hour reaches the highest, at a value of almost 60.
Now, overall, we see that a single 24-hour recall is unlikely to pick up all the supplements that are used compared to the FFQ. And combining an FFQ with a 24-hour recall will pick up even more supplements, including the new ones. And then just combining 2 FFQs at least, 2 24-hour recalls comes very close to the FFQ.
A table on the next slide is entitled, Table 3, Estimated Distributions of Mean Nutrient Intake and Consumption Day Intake from DSs by Method, among U.S. adult supplement users, age equal to or greater than 19 years, in Analytic Sample 3, NHANES 2011 to 2014. It compares values N, mean nutrient intake from DS, and intake from DS percentiles 5th, 25th, 50th and 75th across different substances and methods.
When they looked at nutrient intakes compared to the frequencies that we just looked at right now in terms of prevalence of use, they found that a single 24-hour recall for the different nutrients that they looked at will provide a higher estimate of nutrient intakes compared to the other methods.
The 24-hour day 1 only rows for all the substances, riboflavin, vitamin D, folate, magnesium, and calcium, highlight in the chart, showing consistently higher intake values than the other methods.
And this was the same when they looked at groups of the supplements. The 24-hour recalls will still overestimate the nutrient intakes from the supplements.
Table 4 shows estimated intake values across methods and different supplement types. The rows for 24-hour day 1 only, for MVM, MV/MM, calcium and vitamin D, and single vitamin/mineral highlight in the chart, bearing out the same trend. The next slide reads, NU43CH01_Bailey. RJATS.CLS. April 29, 2023. 11:10. Annual Reviews. Annual Review of Nutrition, Major Gaps in Understanding Dietary Supplement Use in Health and Disease. Regan L. Bailey, Shin-Young Jun, Alexandra E. Cowan, Heather A. Eicher-Miller, Jamie J. Gosh, Joanna D. Dwyer, Terrell J. Hartman, Diane C. Mitchell, Rebecca A. Seguin-Fowler, Ravman J. Carroll, and Lana Tatu's validation studies.
I wanted to just go over briefly some validation studies. This study that just came out recently from Dr. Bailey, and some of you know most of these people, Janet Tooze and Ray Carroll, and some of our own, like Jamie Gosh is here. And they are calling for most validation studies for these instruments. And I think we will back them up for that we need more studies to validate these instruments.
A table has columns titled, Study, Study Design, Objective, and Results. The study column reads, Patterson et al. 1998. 1994 to 1997. A sub-study of the cancer risk. Behavior survey, Seattle metro area N equals 104, 221 years, mean age of 44 years. DS users only, women, 57%, mostly NHW, 91%. The study design column reads, mailed self-administered questionnaire. Phone-administered questionnaire. Clinic, in-person interview and label transcription. The objective column reads, validity 1, mailed questionnaire versus label transcription. 2, phone interview versus label transcription. The text in the results column gets cut off. It reads, incompletely, prevalence. Mailed questionnaire versus label transcription kappa coefficients, 0.36, calcium, to 0.68, 1 say, blank, MV, and 0.70, vitamin E. Phone versus label transcription. Kappa coefficients, 0.14, other MV mixtures, 2, blank, vitamin E, and 0.92, once a day MV. Nutrients, mailed questionnaire versus label transcription correlation, 0.08, iron, to 0.76, vitamin C, blank, mean of 0.50. Age, sex, and education had no statistically, blank, effect. Phone versus label transcription. Correlation, 0.27, iron, to 0.75, vitamin C, with mean of 0.50. Age, sex, and education had no statistically significant effect.
This study was a sub-study of the cancer behavior risk study, a small study in Seattle. It was mostly of women and almost all white. There was a mail questionnaire and then a phone interview, and then the participants went to a clinic where there was a label transcription also. And what was found was that the mailed questionnaire compared to the label transcription and the phone interview, they were fairly similar in terms of the prevalence and also the nutrients estimates. But there was, and they said there was no evidence of systematic error in either of them, the mailed or the phone administered questionnaire. The principal place where the error was seen was in participants being able to sort of think or report the composition of the products that they were reporting. And also they were not very sure of the categories that the products belonged to, but they were very comparable.
A table on the next slide has the same columns. The study column reads, Sadia Bauda et al. 2003. 2000 to 2002. A sub-study of the VITAL study, Seattle metro area N equals 220, 50 to 75 years when recruited. Equal distributions of sex, mostly white, 94%. The study design column reads, mailed self-administered DS questionnaire, baseline and 3 Mo. In-home interview plus label transcriptions. Semi-fasting, greater than or equal to 6 hours, blood and spot urine sample. Collection. The objective column reads, reproducibility, first questionnaire versus second questionnaire. Validity. 1. First questionnaire versus in-home interview plus label transcriptions. 2. Second questionnaire versus biomarker. The text in the results column gets cut off. It reads, incompletely, nutrients correlations, blank, beta-carotene, 0.82, chromium, blank. Urinary calcium was not correlated with supplemental calcium intake.
This other study, which was a sub-study of the VITAL study, also in the same area, was also a small study. There was a mailed self-administered questionnaire at baseline and at 3 months, and then an in-home interview and a label transcription. And then they also had some semi-fasting blood and spot urine sample collection. And they compared the two questionnaires, and then compared the first questionnaire with the questionnaire with the in-home interview and transcription, and the biomarker with the questionnaire. And they found that the correlations between the repeat assessments of the questionnaires were quite high, as you can see, 58 to 82% correlation. There was a slightly lower correlation when you're comparing the questionnaire to the in-home interview and the transcription. And sometimes the biomarkers did not match up with what was reported.
A table on the next slide has the same columns. The study column reads, Stefan et al. 2021. 2005 to 2006. The supplement reporting, SURE, study, participants from the multi-ethnic cohort, recruited from California and Hawaii. N equals 1,029, older adults, mean age of 67.8 years. Equal distributions of sex, NHW, NHB, Hawaiian, Japanese, Hispanic, U.S.-born, Mexican/South American Hispanic. The study design column reads, 2 groups, inventory group, SFO at baseline and at 1 year. 5 in-home inventories in approximately 3-month intervals. Control group, SFQ baseline and at 1 year. The objective column reads, reproducibility, first SFQ versus second SFQ. Validity, SFQ versus DS inventory with label transcription. The text in the results column gets cut off. It reads, incompletely, mean correlation was R equals 0.62 across 17 nutrients.
This third study is probably the main validation study to date. In this particular study, the participants were more diverse, but still they were mostly older adults, as you can see. They used, there were 2 groups. One group had an inventory and the other one did not, and they compared the FFQ and the inventory group. And there was generally good agreement between the 2 different time periods where the FFQ was used. As you can see, quite high correlation. And also the nutrients were fairly correlated between the 2 FFQs, showing that the intake is pretty consistent for those who use dietary supplements. But in terms of the nutrients estimated from them, they varied. And this has been shown by most of the validation studies. It depends on the nutrient that you're looking at. They can be very varied in terms of how correlated they are with the label transcription.
A table on the next slide has the same columns. The study column reads, Murphy et al. 2002. 1994 to 1997. A sub-study of the Hawaii-Los Angeles multi-ethnic cohort study. N equals 2,377, 45 to 75 years when recruited. Equal distributions of sex, NHB, Japanese American, Hispanic, Native Hawaiian, and NHW. The study design column reads, first DHQ at study initiation. 324 hours in approximately 1-month intervals. Second DHO approximately 4 to 6 weeks later. The objective column reads, reproducibility, first DHQ versus second DHQ. Validity, second DHQ versus 324-hour. The text in the results column gets cut off. It reads, incompletely, nutrients, Pearson correlation coefficients ranged from 0.11, folate, to 0.71, vitamin E.
For the third study, which was also a MEC study, a small study of Hawaii and Los Angeles, also fairly diverse, but a little bit smaller, and also of just adults, which used the DHQ that Dr. Kirsten is going to talk about in a few minutes, and also looked at 24-hour recalls. This was the first one that looked at short-term intake instruments versus FFQs. And They compared the first administration of the FFQ to the second one, and then the second administration of the FFQ to the 24-hour recalls combined. And they found that the correlation of the products reported in the two FFQs between the first administration and 4 to 6 months later were very depending on the nutrients also. And the agreement between the recalls and the FFQ was also varied, but generally high for those supplements that are used more commonly. So what this concluded was that the questionnaires actually do fairly well when the supplements are consumed more frequently.
The table on the next slide has the same columns. The study column reads, Hartman et al. 2021. 2015 to 2016. Cancer Prevention Study 3. Diet Validation Sub-Study, U.S. nationwide. N equals 684, 30 to 65 years when recruited. Women 64%, NHW, 62%, NHB, 23%, and Hispanic. The study design column reads, the self-reported FFQ was administered twice, approximately 1 year apart. 6 repeat interviewer administered 24 hours were collected over the year. The objective column reads, validity, first versus second FFQ. Second FFQ versus 6 24 hours. Second FFQ versus 24-hour closest to second FFQ. The text in the results column gets cut off. It reads, incompletely, comparable results by sex. Second FFQ versus the last 24 HR administered, blank, second FFQ. Spearman correlations. Men, varied from R equals 0.65, fish oil, to R equals 0.81, vitamin E, among men. Women, from R equals 0.59, fish oil, to R equals 0.77, calcium, among women.
In this validation study also for cancer prevention study, which was a smaller study, also mostly white, there was a self-report FFQ administered twice, and then 6 24-hour recalls, and they compared the first FFQ to the second one, the second FFQ to the 24-hour recalls, and the second FFQ to the last recall that was closest to that FFQ. And the finding was that the average of the multiple 24-hour recalls were quite close to the FFQ, that second FFQ for the different nutrients, and there was no difference by sex. But when they looked at the last FFQ compared to that last 24-hour recall, there were differences that were seen by sex.
The next slide reads, conclusions. Limited resources, most appropriate tool for the research question. Validation studies. This is call for more research, validation of short-term intake assessment tools.
In conclusion, I just want to say that from these results that we have seen and presented from Cohen et al. And all these other validation studies, we can say that combining multiple tools might be the way to go if you can do it. But however, if resources do not permit, then you have to choose the most appropriate method, and you have to think about those strengths and weaknesses and then choose the most appropriate method based on your research question. We want to echo the call by Bailey et al. Just that we need more validation studies, particularly for these short-term intake instruments, because we know there are error structures and they are generally preferred to FFQs if we can do it. Here are some resources that you can look up after this.
Text, resources NCI. https://dietassessmentprimer.cancer.gov/learn/intake.html. The next 3 resources get cut off. The last resource reads, Bailey R.L., June S., Cowan A., Iker Miller Ha, Gush J.J., Dwyer J.T., Hartman D.J., Mitchell D.C., Sagine Fowler R.A., Carol R.J., Tuzja. Major gaps in understanding dietary supplement use in health and disease. Anu Reverend Nut. 2023 May 17th. DOI 10.1146/Anu Rev Nutra 0119230200327. EPUB ahead of print. MUD 37,196,365.
And I just want to thank you for listening to me. Thank you very much.
The last slide of Dr. Wambogo's presentation reads, National Institutes of Health. Office of Dietary Supplements. Thank you. Edwina Wambogo, Ph.D., M.S., M.Ph., R.D. Edwina.wambogo@nih.gov. Office of Dietary Supplements. National Institutes of Health. Website, ods.od.nih.gov. Email, od@nih.gov. Follow us on Facebook at nih.ods and Twitter. Subscribe to the ODS email list. ods.od.nih.gov/news/ods_listserv.aspx. A QR code sits next to the text in the lower right of the slide. The grid of participant tiles reappears.
Thank you so much. That was excellent. We have time for a few questions here, and I'll look. I think folks have access to the chat. You can also, I think, unmute yourself for questions. So I'll let folks, I'm just checking to be sure I can see everybody here. But one of the things that you talked about was the call for sort of both the combining instruments, what some of the benefits are there, as well as, you know, the trade-offs for just choosing the most appropriate tool given the situation, and then the call for more research. Is there more research that you're specific questions and things that you'd like to see more validation work?
Well, we from all the validation studies that we have looked at, you can see that they have focused on adults, and some of them just older adults. If we could look at what is reported by the younger populations, that would be see how the instruments work for those different age groups. Also, most of those validation studies have not been that diverse in populations. So if we could get more diversity in these assessments, that would be great. And as I was saying, we need more validation for the short-term intake instruments.
So,
and Dr. Gash is here with us, and I would invite her to come along and contribute if she wants to.
Dr. Gash turns on her camera.
Hi. Let me just move my screen over. So I'm actually, yeah, so we had just published a paper, and I really think that the big take-home message was that we actually only had 5 studies where we could actually look at the validation. So right there just tells us we need a lot more studies. You know, we found, you know, often, you know, there's many different ways to do validation, and the most common that we found was using 24-hour recalls as the gold standard. And there was fairly good agreement, but again, these are only 5 studies, and I think for large studies, they need short instruments, short questionnaires, especially large cohort studies. So trying to get better validated, like Edwina just said, short questionnaires on supplement use is really critical. I think I'll stop there, but definitely that's what we need, because 24-hour recalls for supplements can be a bit long for studies to be able to do.
Right, so there's always that balance with sort of granularity of data and being able to capture the data that you need in the short time. I think we'll have some.
I should also say that the level of precision also differs. So, you know, for a lot of the ways we capture supplement use, especially in the questionnaires, you know, being able to rank order nutrients works, but if you want really accurate, precise estimates, this is a lot harder to do with these methods. So it also has to, you know, the researchers have to decide what level of information that they need for their study. Is categorization enough, or do they really need those precise, accurate measurements? That's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's so helpful. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Edwina. Were you gonna?
Oh no, I was just saying thank you, Jamie.
So I think we'll have time at the end for additional questions after we've heard Dr. Herrick. But I think we'll go ahead and move on to our next talk on dietary intake assessment using ASA 24. And I'll take a minute to introduce Dr. Herrick. She is a program director with the Risk Factor Assessment Branch of the Epidemiology and Genomics Research Program in NCI's Division of Cancer Control and Population Sciences. Her focus is on developing, designing, and conducting nutrition-related research related to dietary methods, dietary instruments, measurement error, dietary surveillance, and nutritional epidemiology. Dr. Herrick oversees the web-based automated self-administered 24-hour diet assessment tool, or ASA24, and you'll hear more about that. She also is serving as the project scientist for the NIH's Common Fund's Nutrition for Precision Health, powered by the All of Us research program. Before she was at NCI, Dr. Herrick was a nutritional epidemiologist at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And in this capacity, she estimated usual intake distributions to assess the nutrition status of U.S. population groups and conducted analyses on dietary behaviors. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Herrick. Thank you. And Dr. Wambogo, please stay close because we'll have more time for discussion and questions at the end.
Sure.
Thanks very much for that introduction. Let me see if I can get the screen share to work. And make sure that everyone can still hear me. I've lost you visually, so there we go.
We can hear you and see you.
Perfect.
Dr. Herrick shares her screen and opens a presentation. The first slide reads, NCI's Tools for Dietary Intake Assessment. Kirsten A. Herrick, Ph.D., MSc. Division of Cancer Control and Population Sciences. Epidemiology and Genetics Research Program. Risk Factor Assessment Branch. Kirsten.Herrick at nih.gov. NIH National Cancer Institute. May 23, 2023.
Well, so my task for today is to talk about some of the tools that NCI has for dietary assessment intake. And thankfully, I get to follow the fabulous presentation by Dr. Wambogo because I don't have to go into all the details about all the important things that we consider when we're building these tools. So I get to talk about the fun part and talk about the tools themselves and set a little bit of the context for the development of these tools.
A slide reads, What We Wish For. A comic on the slide shows two women sitting on a sofa while a man walks past with a video camera strapped to him. Text, close to home at ucomics.com.
So this is what we think we wish for, right? We want to be able to capture everything that somebody is eating. We have this video feed that would capture not only what they're eating, but when and the context that it occurs in. So I think that's probably something we're aiming for, but we don't quite yet know what the unintended consequences of some of this type of monitoring would create. So we think we want this, but we've got to have a lot more methodological studies to figure out if that's really what we're after.
The next slide reads, Main Dietary Assessment Methods in Population Studies. An arrow labeled, FFQ, points to a photo of a questionnaire. One labeled, Dietary Record, points to a photo of note cards with tables. An arrow labeled, Observation/Weighted, also points to this photo. An arrow labeled, 24-hour recall points to a photo of a woman in a lab coat holding a piece of fruit, sitting across the table from another woman.
So instead, we need to stick with the tools that we have at our disposal. And I'll focus on the main dietary assessment methods that we have for population science studies. Here, food frequency questionnaires, 24-hour recalls, and the dietary record. And with the small caveat that the records could also include observational or weighed components.
The next slide has a photo of a supplement bottle and one of a page with the heading, Total Calorie Consumption. Text. DHQ3, Diet History Questionnaire. Healthy Eating Index. Your Health Eating Index, HEI, report.
So to provide a really brief background of the presentation today, I'm going to try and provide really a broad overview of the development of a lot of these tools because you need the context that they've been developed in. And then I'll touch on two tools that NCI manages, the Diet History Questionnaire, or the DHQ, and also the automated self-administered 24-hour dietary assessment tool, or ASA24. And during that presentation, I'll also touch on how specifically these tools capture supplement intake and some of the return of results that these tools incorporate.
The next slide is entitled, Challenges in Diet Assessment.
So as I'm sure everybody's well aware, there are lots of challenges in dietary assessment. They rely on self-report. So people have to be able to recall or complete questionnaires. and they're prone to measurement error. And that's important because the bias that creates, and then the loss of statistical power. So when we want to look at diet disease relationships, we don't have the statistical power. They also have high burden. This is not only for respondents, but also for researchers, and they can be quite costly. Food frequency questionnaires can be less, and that's the reason they're often used in large cohort studies. And then something I won't really touch on today is really the limitations of the food composition databases, but that's another important consideration when choosing tools and thinking about the results of any dietary assessment. So what I want to talk about just briefly is the technological explosion that's occurred. And really, when you think about the tools that we have now versus what we had about 10, 15, 20 years ago, it's amazing the things that we have now. And these new methods have really come up to increase accuracy, make it a lot easier for respondents to complete these tools. And most importantly, if you've ever done any coding of 24-hour recalls that were conducted in person, you know that automating that process to pair what's reported as food and drink into the nutrients and food groups, that's an incredible innovation. But it also leads to a reduction in cost for both researchers and clinicians. And these new tools we want to be able to use widely through multiple ages across diverse populations and to address lots of different research questions.
The next slide shows a photo of a food frequency questionnaire, a sheet of questions with bubbles next to answer options, corresponding to different frequencies. Text: respondent answers questions regarding how many times he or she ate and drank different types of foods and beverages over the past month, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. Sometimes the participant also answers questions about the portion sizes of those foods and beverages.
So you know quite well what food frequency questionnaires are, and they have started out as what you see here on the screen, questions that ask about particular food types over particular time frame, a month, 3 months, 6 months, or a year are common. And then they have skip patterns. So an individual would say yes or no that they had these foods, and then there would be additional questions about it. And sometimes these food frequency questionnaires can ask about portion sizes. It's not something they always do.
The next slide has the heading, Web-Based Automated, FFQ. Text: advantages beyond paper and pencil, skip patterns are programmed, few/no missed questions. More flexibility. Cleaner data. Automated analysis. Disadvantages beyond paper and pencil, it's still an FFQ. Computer access and related technology issues.
So in terms of innovations that have come forward with food frequency questionnaires, the obvious innovation is movement to a computer-based platform. So if we get out of using paper and pencil, we can program in the skip pattern so there's fewer missed questions. And it allows for more flexibility so we can change these questions. Also, there's cleaner data and it can all be automated. But of course, the disadvantage is all we've done is moved that food frequency questionnaire onto a computer platform. So it's still an FFQ. It still suffers from the same types of error that I'm sure you've already discussed. But there can be different kinds of errors that are introduced by having access to computers or other technological issues.
On the questionnaire, a tab highlighted to the left reads, "What beverages did you drink?" The open section lists different beverages with checkboxes next to them. To the left, a questionnaire section is headed, "Cereals, Breads, Snacks." It lists different foods of this type with answer bubbles to indicate the frequency and amount consumed.
Nonetheless, NCI has developed a food frequency questionnaire called the Diet History Questionnaire, which takes the paper-based and puts it in a computer form that can be accessed both on a desktop and a mobile phone platform. But a lot of research went into how best to organize the questions to make sure that it was easy for respondents to cognitively move through the questionnaire and think about the foods or beverages and supplements that they've consumed and get a better recall for those items. So here you can see the question asking what beverages an individual would consume. And so this is a gatekeeper question. They tick the foods or beverages that they've consumed, and then it will go on and ask additional questions about those items that the respondent said yes that they've had. Quick note about the DHQ3, this version of the questionnaire is based on NHANES 2007-8 through 2013-14 with some additional nutrients from NDSR 2017. So in addition to all the research that went into figuring out how best to ask the questions, DHQ is based on the intakes reported in the US population.
A question on the DHQ3 reads, what vitamins and dietary supplements did you take? Please check the box next to each vitamin or dietary supplement that you took at least once in the past 12 months. The page lists 26 different supplements with checkboxes next to them. A red button in the lower right of the page reads, continue.
And specifically, I wanted to make sure we talk about how does this tool ask about dietary supplements. So here you can see the gatekeeper question for dietary supplements in DHQ. This is the list of all the supplements an individual would be presented with, and then further detail would be asked about each one of those.
On the next slide, a questionnaire heading reads, multivitamin/mineral, such as one a day, Centrum, Neutralite, Geritol or prenatal, as pills, liquids or packets, not including eye health supplements. A box is checked next to the text, you took multivitamins over the past 12 months. 6 questions on the page ask about multivitamin type, form factor, ingredients, and length of use.
So I'll take you through that very quickly. Once they've indicated what supplements they consumed, there are pathways for those particular supplements. In this example, I selected a multivitamin, and it asks about how often the individual took it, what type, whether it contained minerals, gummy types, and then how long the individual had been taking it. Now, it also, oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting confused. I was going to talk about brands, but we don't cover brands here. That brings me to the 24-hour recall.
The next slide reads, 24-hour dietary recall. A pathway is entitled, USDA's 5-step automated pass method, AMPM. Steps along the downward pathway read. Quick list, forgotten foods, list, time and occasion, detail cycle, and final review probe. Incomplete text reads, respondent tells an interviewer everything he or she ate and drank over the past 24 hours. Needs multiples days to estimate, blank, intakes. Moshfegaj et al. JCN.
So the 24-hour recall, as you've heard discussed, is a short-term instrument. And here I'm going to focus on the USDA's automated multiple pass method, or AMPM. Here you can see those 5 steps that are used, and the idea is to provide a logical pathway for individuals to recall the things that they've consumed in the last 24 hours. So this pathway is used for our National Nutrition Surveillance System, NHANES, and it is the reference method for self-report items. And for those who've used NHANES, you probably noticed that after the data is collected, there's a bit of a lag between the time that data collection closes and when new files are released. And the dietary data, in fact, has the largest lag for any of the data files to be released. It can be anywhere from 2 to 3 years by the time the data is collected, cleaned, and then released. So when we talk about innovations for the 24-hour recall, we really want to think about how we can reduce that time frame and how we can make it easier for individuals to complete.
The next slide is entitled, Innovation, 24-hour dietary recall.
So innovations in this space include eliminating the interviewer. Interviewers are expensive and can be impractical. If we don't require an interviewer, that means a respondent can complete the tool whenever they have time and aren't beholden to trying to schedule an interviewer. And because it's electronic interviewing, the whole process can be automated. And that's critical, particularly for the auto coding. So as soon as an individual has completed their recall, by the press of a button, the output file is generated in real time. And so responses are available for the researchers to look at the data files, but also there's a respondent nutrition report that can be made available to respondents at the end.
The next slide is entitled, Rationale and History of Development.
So to summarize, for the development of ASA 24, really the challenge was to think about what can we do above and beyond food frequency questionnaires and interviewer administered 24 hours that are going to make at least some of the challenges lessened going forward. So the task was to collect multiple high quality recalls at a low cost for large scale nutrition research. And that began with that stimulated the development of ASA 24 in 2006. And a beta version was released in 2009. This effort has been supported across the NIH, but had its start and home at NCI. Since it's been developed, there are some different versions available. Not only are there US versions, but there's also a Canadian and Australian version. The US version is available both in English and Spanish. And over the years, we've made innovations and improvements to the system. In 2016, the system became available both on laptop and smartphones, and was enabled to collect food records. So we have a pattern set up over the years to typically release a new version of ASA 24 every 2 years, and have any single version available for about 3 years. And at the bottom of the screen, you can see some of the enhancements and linkages that we've released in the past and things that we're doing moving forward. I'll talk about the respondent nutrition report and happy to answer questions about any of the other ones later in the talk.
The enhancements and linkages at the bottom of the slide read: Migration to cloud, APIs available, sleep module, new foods tool, user testing, respondent nutrition report, RNR, and Spanish language version, redesigned researcher website, linkage to NOVA, level of food processing. The next slide reads, what is ASA 24?
So just like the name says, ASA 24 is an automated, self-administered 24-hour dietary assessment tool. It's web-based, and that allows for that auto-coding to happen. There are over 13 million pathways that enable the foods, beverages, and supplements that a person reports to be linked to a nutrient database so we can see the nutrient and food groups at the push of a button. And this is really an incredible innovation that makes dietary assessment accessible and available for researchers to include in their studies. And of course, it's based on the automated multiple pass method, the reference method for self-completion tools. So we know that it's following a standard that's well known and well received in the research community. It was developed under contract by NCI and Westat. And in addition to the speed with which it can process data, another key feature is that it's available at no cost to researchers. So again, this makes dietary assessment accessible for research purposes.
The next slide reads, overview of the ASA 24 system. A green computer icon with a chart has text below that reads, researchers register a study. An arrow from this computer points to a red computer with a knife and fork icon and a red smartphone. Text below reads, respondents complete dietary recalls or records. An arrow from the red computer points to another green computer with a chart icon. Text below it reads, researchers monitor responses and obtain data analysis.
So when I talk about ASA 24, it's really a system of 2 websites. We have the researcher website where researchers can log in, create an account, and create a study, and send out requests for individuals to complete their particular study. So you too could call yourself a researcher on the ASA 24 website, create an account, and set up a study. Then there's the respondent website, which is where individuals log in and actually complete the 24-hour recall or record. Meanwhile, researchers can continue to monitor the study and obtain responses once data collection is complete.
The next slide compares AMPM and ASA 24. A list below AMPM reads, quick list, forgotten foods, time and occasion, detail, final review and probe. A list below ASA 24 reads, quick list, with time and occasion, meal gap, details, forgotten foods, and final review and probe.
Comparison of AMPM versus ASA 24, you can see that there's still the 5-step method. It's a slight difference because when you implement it on an electronic format, it's you've got to make some concessions, but it still follows that same general pattern.
Icons on the next slide correspond to the list items: multiple versus single logins, supplements, food source, location of meals, completion time restricted to 24 hours, midnight to midnight versus past 24 hours, electronic device used during meals, and with whom meals were eaten.
In addition, ASA 24 contains a few other things, bells and whistles, you might say, in comparison to the AM/PM. Collects information about food source, location of meals, who meals might have been consumed with, and electronic device use during meals. So there's more contextual information that it collects.
The next slide reads, runs on desktops and all mobile devices. A page on a desktop shows a drop-down menu from the question, Cheerios, what kind was it? A mobile phone screen displays the same page and drop-down menu, condensed to fit the screen.
Here you can see the way ASA 24 is rendered, both on a cell phone on the left and then a desktop computer on the right.
A slide is titled, ASA 24 Respondent Site, Find a Food. The text, bagel, is entered in the search field beneath the text, food and drinks, breakfast, Tuesday, November 30th. Below the search field, a gray box lists 22 results. To the left, text reads, filter your results, with food categories to select.
And here I'll go through how a respondent would find a bagel in the system so you can get a sense for how the system works. Here we've typed bagel into the search bar, and in the middle gray panel, you can see the search results. Now, if I'd had a considerable number of results, I could use the far right to filter my results to get a smaller number of results to look through. Once I've identified the term that I want to use, I can select bagel, I push that, and then it'll follow another pathway based on that first answer to capture additional information to get that really rich, detailed information we know 24 recalls can collect.
On the following page, drop-downs sit below he questions, bagel, did it have any fruit or vegetable? And, bagel, what kind was it? Beneath, a question asks, bagel, what size was it? Answer options depict differently sized bagels, in comparison to a plate.
So here, for the bagel pathway, it asks me whether or not it had any fruit or vegetables, what type of bagel it was, and then goes on to ask a question about the portion. And just in case you want to make sure that there wasn't anything else included on that bagel, there's an additional question that provides you an opportunity to say, hey, there were other things that I had in my bagel.
A question on the next slide reads, bagel, did you add anything to your bagel that you haven't already reported? With answer options yes, nothing added, and don't know. On the next slide, this time the term multivitamin is entered into the search field. The gray box lists 17 results, including melatonin and multigrain Cheerios.
And of course, for this particular group, I wanted to make sure you could see what the pathway would be for a multivitamin. Here, putting multivitamin in the search bar returns 17 results. Now, I will say that depending upon what you put in that search bar, you will get different results. So I could put a space between multi and vitamin, and I would get different results. I'd like to say that we have the search engine the same quality as Google, but we're not there yet. We're always seeking to try and tweak our search engine based on popularity and spelling, but it's a challenge every time. So here you can see the main results in the gray panel, but again, you can filter your results over on the side. Once you've decided what best meets your needs, you select that, and you'll move on to another cascade of choices based on that initial choice.
A question reads, was it formulated for children, seniors, or something else? An arrow from the option, Women's Formula, on a phone screen points to another set of questions about formulation, brand, kind and amount.
So for multivitamins, these are the options for how it was formulated. I took a screenshot from my cell phone so you could see how that was rendered. And then I chose a women's formula multivitamin. So this is the cascade of additional questions you would get through ASA 24 about that particular multivitamin. And there is a question here you can see about the brand name. It didn't fit on one screen and I didn't want to mess up the flow, so I wanted to show it to you here. These are the brand name options for multivitamin. And you can see If an individual says, wow, I see the list, but it's not what I have, there is an opportunity for a respondent to select other, and that will pop open a text box so the respondent could write in the name of their particular supplement.
Brand names on a phone screen read: No, 21st Century Mega Multi for Women, Basics Women's Health, Formula, Berkeley, and Jensen, CVS Health, DG Health Women's One Daily, Equaline, Equate, GNC Women's Ultra Mega, Kroger, Melaleuca Vitality, Nature Made, Nature's Dynamics, Nature's Measure, Nature's Way Alive, New Chapter Organics, Neutralite Women's Pack, One a Day, Puritan's Pride Premium, Women's Exclusive Formula, Rainbow Light Food Based, Multivitamin, Rite Aid, Safeway, Super Nutrition Simply One, Trader Joe's, Ultra Woman Daily Multi, Premium Performance, Up, and Up, Vitafusion, and Walgreens, with options at the bottom for Other, and Don't Know.
So that's covered the supplements. I'm going to provide a little bit more information about ASA 24 in general to get a sense for the whole tool. And one of the questions I often get is, well, how long does this really detailed process take? And looking at administrative data across the whole system, on average, it takes around 24 minutes. So that's not too bad for the detailed information that you're collecting.
A pie chart illustrates uses of ASA 24, with 66% for research, 15% clinical, 11% teaching, 5% demo/testing and 3% other. Text: Publications using ASA 24, https://epi.grants.cancer.gov/asa24/resources/publications.html.
We know the system is predominantly used for research. Here you can see there's around 66% of our researchers or individuals using the system on the researcher site say they're using it for research, but there's still a fair percentage of clinical and teaching uses.
A graph on the next slide is titled, Peer Reviews Publications that used ASA 24 to collect dietary data. The graph measures number of publications per year from 2012 to 2022. The graph increases steeply, especially from 2018 to 2022, from around 30 to about 140. Text: https://epi.grants.cancer.gov/asa24/resources/publications.html.
1,000 dietary recalls or records collected through ASA 24.
The next slide is entitled, Health Topics where ASA 24 is used. A word cloud on the slide is shaped like a speech bubble. Prominent words read: Prevention and Wellness, Overweight and Obesity, Maternal Health, Cancer, Digestive Health, Diabetes, Heart Disease, and Child Health and Development.
And this word cloud provides some information about the types of questions that ASA 24 has been used to address.
The next slide reads, Prevalence of dietary supplement reporting between ASA 24 and AMPM. Type of dietary supplements reported between ASA 24 and AMPM. Statistical methods, equivalence testing. Panic-Cite, Thompson-Fay, Bailey R.L., et al. Comparing reported dietary supplement intakes between two 24-hour recall methods, the automated self-administered 24-hour dietary assessment tool and the interview-administered automated multiple pass method. J. A. Cadnut Diet. 2018, 118, 1080 to 1086.
Lastly, I wanted to provide a little bit of information about a comparison study of dietary assessment using ASA 24 and AMPM. I've provided the reference down at the bottom of the slide, but this study looked at the prevalence of dietary supplement reporting between ASA 24 and the interviewer-administered AMPM.
The next slide is entitled, Prevalence of Dietary Supplement Use. Two bar charts on the slide compare % of participants reporting use, for men and women across ASA 24 and AMPM. For the chart, % of participants reprint dietary supplements, 46% of men with ASA 24 and 43% of men with AMPM report use. 49% of women with ASA 24 and 50% of women with AMPM report use. For the chart, % of users reporting multivitamin mineral, 58% of men with ASA 24 and 67% of men with AMPM report use. 58% of women with ASA 24 and 64% of women with AMPM report use. An attribution reads, Panic-Cite et al. J. A. Cadnutra Diet. 2018, 118, 1080 to 1086.
I'll just get to the punchline here. You can see that reporting in any supplement, both tools provided fairly similar results. And the same was true for reporting a multivitamin, multimineral supplement. So using the same methodology, one using an interviewer administered, the other as a self-administered tool, there's evidence that there's little difference in reported supplement use by mode of administration.
The next slide reads, Respondent Nutrition Report. A report on the slide is titled Calorie Intake by Meal. A donut chart illustrates percentages of calories from snacks, breakfast, lunch, and dinner over the course of one day. Text reads, Daily calories, allowance, 2,000. Eaten, 1,967. A filled bar at the bottom of the report shows how close the eaten amount of calories is to the allowed amount.
So that closes out my discussion about the tools themselves. And now I want to talk about the Respondent Nutrition Report. So here you can see on the right panel the way the ASA 24 Respondent Nutrition Report, or R&R, looked until just recently. We've had a huge revision of the website.
The next slide reads, New to ASA 24 to 2020 Revised Respondent Report. The slide displays the new version of the report, which displays eaten calories versus target calories. The eaten calorie value is 2,300 and the target value is 2,000. The graphic around the values is a teal circle with an extended tail that reads, 300 calories over target. The report displays percentages of calories from carbohydrates, proteins, fat, and alcohol, with target ranges for each. Instead of a target range in percentages beneath alcohol, this metric reads, limit intake.
And here you can see the revised version. And you can check it out yourself if you go to the website link at the bottom.
Text, https://epi.grants.cancer.gov/asa24/respondent/nutrition report.html.
What I will say as well is that this particular nutrition report is available both in the DHQ system and in ASA 24. There are slight differences in that the ASA 24 Respondent Nutrition Report provides a really brief information about the foods and beverages and supplements that a respondent reported on their given day. That's not included in the food frequency questionnaire. It just doesn't make sense. But the R&R for the ASA 24 system is about a 10-page report. This is usually page 3 of the report that provides information on total intake, your total calories, and then your 4 larger food groups. We went through a user testing process with the ASA 24 report that included eye tracking and interviews, and we got some really great feedback that this page was well received.
Quotes next to the new version of the report read, It is very informative and the colors and graphs make it easy to identify the important information, and I like that it had the little extension that tells me that I'm over.
They liked the information, and we found that individuals really wanted additional information in the report and resources for even more information that we couldn't provide on the report, and that's why you see the link to the dietary guidelines.
The next page of the report shows eaten and target values for grains, fruits, dairy, vegetables and protein, with subgroups eaten listed below. Graphics around the values are circles that are either fully filled, indicating the target value was hit, or incomplete, indicating the target value was not hit. A quote reads, I think it is good. It is not overwhelming. The text at the bottom is really good. It advises me on what are some good eating habits.
This is the 4th page on the report that goes through the daily food group targets, and the respondents felt like this was a great use of graphics and they were easily understood, so they knew how much that they had eaten compared to the target and what particular subgroups their intake was coming from.
The next page of the report lists eaten and limit values for added sugars, alcohol, saturated fats, and sodium. The graphics corresponding to these measures are filled bars, eaten, and striped bars, limit.
The next page in the report talks specifically about nutrients and foods to limit. Here, we wanted to make sure that respondents understood that this was an entirely different type of presentation, and so we changed the orientation of the graphics, and so they can see what they have eaten compared to the limits, and respondents reacted very positively to this.
A slide is entitled, Section, Nutrient Intake from Food and Drinks. It displays a large page of the report with 22 nutrients and eaten and target values. The graphics corresponding to each nutrient area curved bar, which either falls short of or surpasses a line representing 100% of the target value. Text on the slide reads, "Participants were overwhelmed and not sure where to focus. Confused about unknown nutrients, for example, copper. Confused by the lack of pattern among the colors. Needed additional information." Quotes read, "Don't know what micronutrients are. It says that my body needs them, but I don't know what they are. To me, all these look like things for my body. R2P1, and like the colors. At first I was not sure what they indicate. Were they trying to tell me something? But I like the idea that it is different colors. R2P6.
Then we came to some challenges, and this page lists out all the nutrients from foods and drinks. And in summary, respondents really just felt like they were overwhelmed. They didn't know where to focus. Some folks were confused by the particular nutrients. One respondent, in fact, said, "Gosh, what's copper? Where do I get that? What is that in?" and wanted to learn more. And then there wasn't a distinct pattern with the nutrients, and they wanted more information. So these were all revisions that we made to the respondent nutrition report. And so the minerals are now focused on one page and one color. Similarly, vitamins are on another page and another color. So we addressed all the concerns that respondents had for this particular page.
The next slide is entitled, Section, Nutrient Intake from Food, Drinks, and Supplements. It displays a large table of nutrients comparing nutrient intake from food with that from supplements. Text on the slide reads, "Participants did not recognize the difference in information in this section from the previous section. Did not understand recommended daily allowance and upper intake level, did not units and shading, vitamin C." Quotes read, "It is similar to what I just saw. Is it the same information? R2P1, and it tells you how much I got from Y food and intake from supplemental vitamins. It adds those numbers. I was a little confused until I got to the bottom because I did not know what upper intake level meant. But it explains that at the bottom. R2P2.
But then we got to the last page of the respondent nutrition report, the one that includes the nutrient intake from foods, drinks, and supplements. And perhaps because it was at the end of the report, it was a large table, folks really just were overwhelmed. And it was clear that this page didn't go over very well, and respondents really had a hard time understanding what this information meant and how they could use it. So we were very fortunate to find some extra money to do a project, and over the pandemic, there was a project that went forward to test respondents' reactions to two different forms of this report. Here you can see a table on the left and a graphic on the right.
The next slide shows a table next to a graphic. The table has columns for intake from food, intake from supplements, total intake, target, and limit. The graphic is a segmented bar chart illustrating percentages from food and supplements, filled in blue and green, and empty portions indicating the limits, with lines across the bars indicating the target values.
And after going through a great deal of user testing and identifying what people really liked, what they didn't understand, and making revisions, we were set to move forward and program the graphic, and discovered that we couldn't program it and have had to go back to the drawing board, but have discovered there's a way to basically integrate the table and the graphic. So that's coming out in the next probably few months. So you can check it out on our website when it's all done.
A URL on the next slide reads, https://epi.grants.cancer.gov/dhq3/return-of-results.html.
Next, I'm going to talk about a new report, and this is the first time that we've presented anything about this particular report, but we've been hard at work developing a healthy eating index report. Dr. Reedy has been instrumental in moving this forward, and this will come out as another return of results option within the DHQ3. So I'll show you some really brief slides on this. It hasn't gone live yet. We expect to do that in the next couple months.
The next slide displays pages of the new report. One page reads, Your HEI report, and says, Overall diet quality score out of 100, 23.98. Two bar charts sit below. One is entitled, Eat for Good Health, with bars for different food groups like dairy and whole fruits with a line indicating the 100% target. The other one is entitled, Limit for Good Health, with categories like added sugars and saturated fat, also with a line indicating the 100% target value. A page of the report beside this one reads, Changes you should make. It lists different food and nutrient categories with suggested actions.
But the idea is to provide a really tailored report to respondents so they can see, based on their food frequency questionnaire responses, what their overall diet quality score was, how they scored within each of the foods to eat for good health and the foods to limit. And then there's specific targeted information about changes that they could be making in their own diet.
Another page of the report, similar to the previous, lists the food and nutrient groups from the limit chart under the heading, Changes You Should Make, with suggested actions. Another page of the report is titled, Resources. It lists and describes different resources like My Plate Plan and healthfinder.gov.
And so this is another page of the HEI report. This page specifically relates to foods that they would limit. Again, this is an example based on just a version of the DHQ that we went through so we could provide some results for. And that is the end of my show and tell for our respondent nutrition reports. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the army of individuals that make all of this happen for ASA 24 and DHQ.
The acknowledgement slide reads, Westat, Tina Adler, Scott Osborne, Chris Bingley, Amber Brown McFadden, Sebastian Kaye, David Dion, Stephanie Fears, Mauricio Flores, Glenn Frankel, Andrew Garcia, Sophia Jang, Jamie Zhao, Shun, Sherry, G, Delia Kahane, Yevgeny Kolomanovich, Lindsay Kirshner, Ben Lott, Noemi Luckiola, Lindsay McDougall, Matthew McIntyre, Beth Middle, V. G. Narayanaswamy, Thomas Nicholas, Tom Nicholson, Tara Lynn Paul, Ann Reederer, Cindy, Kate, Roundtree, Wenby Sue, Maria Tamburi, Leon Teet, Clark Tyra, Sarah Woodruff, Saku Yoda, Nadir Zagil, Vinpeng Zhang, Thea Palmer Zimmerman. USDA, Tusa Rebecca Schaap. University of Waterloo, Sharon Kirkpatrick. NCI, NIH, Everett Carpenter, Christy Kiefer, Emily Kruger, Jennifer Lerman, James McLean, Nancy Petistman, Lauren O'Connor, Amy Suber, Edwina Wambogo, Gordon Willis, Meg Zimmer. USDA FSRG provision of supporting databases, Alana Moshfegh.
You'll notice a lot of familiar names that I'm sure that you've heard from folks in your presentations today and yesterday perhaps as well. So I just want to say thank you to all of those involved and say that I'm ready for questions. And I'll stop sharing so we can see everybody.
Dr. Herrick's last slide reads, Questions? Kirsten.herrick@nih.gov. The grid of participants reappears as Dr. Herrick stops sharing her screen.
Great, excellent. Thank you so much. So if we could take time now to have questions for both Dr. Herrick and also, Dr. Wambogo, that would be great. I'll pause and let folks have a chance here. I'll open up the chat again, and if folks want to come off, put their cameras on, or just to come off mute, raise their hand, they can go ahead and do that for their questions. One thing, here we go. I'll go ahead and look at a question. Is there an option to export results from ASA 24 as an Excel file or CSV file for analysis by researchers?
Yes, great question. Yes, ASA 24 exports 6 different output files for researchers. They are CSV files. If you have a large study and you're going to be pulling down lots of data, we also have APIs that would allow you to pull down that data en masse. So those functionalities are available.
Great question. Thank you. So I was going to sort of turn it back to our speakers and ask if you each had a question for one another in this time where we've been talking about assessment. So I'll put you on the spot again.
I don't think I have any question for Kirsten, but I can see one question that just came in for Kirsten again on ASA 24.
So I'll go ahead and read that. Oh, go ahead. Do you want to say it?
Sure, I was going to read it out. Can we use ASA 24 for teaching and research at the same time? There are no prohibitions to setting up as many studies as you wish. So could you use, I think the only reason that you might not be able to use it for both research and teaching at the same time would be IRB provisions. If you weren't allowed, share that data in a teaching environment. But yes, by all means, you can set up a study and do research and teach with it, no problems.
I see another great question that just came in the chat, and I'll go ahead and read that. This is a question about how often the food list is updated in the ASA 24. Are there efforts to add more culturally diverse foods? We're working to use it for a study. And I see this as a limitation right now without having to utilize the other or recipe option.
Kirsten.
Yes, for Kirsten, sorry.
Yeah, no, thanks for that question. So as you put in your question, there is the recipe option. So if an individual can't find the food in the food list, recipe is a great option. We do have a new foods tool that we have made available to researchers. And it is an option if you know that the population you might be working in has a lot of foods that you think are not in ASA 24. What we found in talking to researchers with this new tool is that actually a lot of the foods are in ASA 24, but what we can do to make it easier for respondents is to make it a synonym. If there's a particularly cultural word that means more to your population, we can link that to the food list terms within ASA 24, so it'll populate, so the search essentially gets better. But if it is in fact a food that is not within ASA 24, you can use this new foods tool to add it to your study so that it'll be ready to go when you start implementing it within your study population. But I will say there are lots of foods in there that folks wouldn't really expect. We have moose bacon, which was a surprise to me. So I would say through the process of looking at the new foods tool, it's important to really think and look through ASA 24 to see if it is in there. We just need to find a way to access it.
Great. We have another question about ASA 24. This is whether you have any insight into how many studies use ASA 24 as an interviewer administered versus self-administered instrument. And then I might also just add if you have thoughts on sort of the pros and cons of the tool as both being administered both of those ways.
So this is a great question. We have started trying to capture the information about whether people are using ASA 24 as self-administered or interviewer administered. And I don't have any numbers about that right now. We're still combing through the data. What we're doing is actually looking through all the publications that mention ASA 24 and going through the methods to see how they've implemented it. So follow up with me in maybe a week or two and I can get a number for you. As you know, ASA 24 was not designed to be an interviewer administered tool. So it's a little clunky. If you're going to use it as an interviewer administered tool, you might want prompts that say, when you said you had breakfast yesterday, you reported yogurt. Can you tell me more about that yogurt? So we are considering what it would take to develop a different mode for ASA 24 that would allow it to be interviewer administered. And I think if we continue down the thread of utilizing all the new innovative technologies that are available to us, then there's value in considering an interviewer administered version of ASA 24. I can imagine doing one, through Zoom, where you maybe can't get access to individuals. The problem with not using some of the technological aspects is we'd have to think through what we do with portion sizes. If a respondent isn't looking at the selection of portions on a screen, are we providing them with a photo booklet? Are we capturing images and they're sending us images? There are some questions that we'd have to work through if we were using it as an interviewer administered tool. But I don't think we'd just create it as an interviewer administered tool to mirror what happens in AM/PM. I don't think we need the duplicative efforts.
But I'm guessing, Kirsten, in terms of dietary supplements, that would be an easier thing to do, though, compared to the foods where you have to think about the visual aids that you have to use.
I think so, but my concern would be capturing all the detailed label information from a dietary supplement. I don't know. We'd have to talk through what the key pieces of information that you'd want to capture. I'm really keen to think about how we can utilize image capture devices. Like everybody carries around a cell phone, or most people carry around a cell phone. So how could we really leverage that to improve our dietary assessment methods?
Right. Can you talk a little bit about the validation of ASA24 and how widely it's used outside of the US, for instance, maybe, and what you're thinking about the validation for dietary supplements?
Okay, so question 1, how frequently it's used outside of the US? So ASA24 has a Canadian version and an Australian version. The Australian version is dated back to 2016. It has not yet been updated. And I suspect that that the folks that supported ASA24's 2016 Australia will probably go with a different tool, Intake 24, because it's married to a different database, one that's more relevant to the types of foods and beverages and supplements that individuals in Australia would be consuming. As I said, I wasn't going to talk about databases, but you may make me delve into the databases. I think that's a key piece, marrying up all the detailed food descriptions to a food code to get those nutrients is a very laborious process. Like I said, 13 million pathways in ASA24. It is not insignificant to make that linkage to a database. So their Intake 24 is a program developed in the UK. And for example, they already have questions about portion sizes in vernacular that's much more common and familiar to folks in Australia. ASA24 2018 Canada is the most recent version of Canadian ASA24. I'm not sure the direction that the Canadians will go in for updating the database and the program, because there is a fair amount of overlap in the database that serves ASA24 Australia and ASA24 US. But I haven't heard any more about that. And the discussion about database kind of gets at the crux of the question about how widely ASA24 would be used in an international format. And if you can make sure that it's culturally sensitive, that it represents the foods and beverages and supplements that your population will be exposed to, then I think, yes, you could use it. But the database is key, and it is not an insignificant task to link to a database. And I don't remember if there was another question. Did I miss one?
One more, I believe. Oh no, I was validation. You could talk a little bit about how, right?
So validation. So ASA24 2011 was validated. So that's the first version beyond the beta. And that was validated with doubly labeled water. And of course, we know with validation studies, we have very few biomarkers that we can use, at least for energy, protein, sodium, potassium. That's about it. There are some new ones coming along, but they haven't hit mainstream and haven't been using them yet. I don't know that there's value in doing a whole new validation study on the tool if we're not going to change the types of questions that we're asking. if we're going to say, throw out the multiple pass method and use a totally different way of collecting information, then yes, I think we should validate it. I agree there should be more work for assessing dietary supplements with ASA 24. That has not been validated with any sort of biomarkers, certainly in younger populations. So I think there's scope to continue working there. But I would stress, and this is something, I don't know, perhaps I shouldn't put words in your mouth, but I do think that there's no one tool to rule them all. I'm gonna show my penchant for Lord of the Rings, but there's no one dietary assessment tool that will be everything and do everything. It's really important to think through what your research questions are, what your resources are, what your population can handle. So I think those are all important, and that's the reason we need all these different tools, because they have different strengths, and we can balance some of those things out.
Very true.
Well, and just to go back, Edwina, some of those things I feel like that Kirsten was just saying, I think I heard you talk about as well, sort of with the some of those trade-offs to consider. There's no one tool to rule them all, or the combination of different tools that were used for dietary assessment intake, and then again sort of matching the tool to your question, depending on how you're using the particular assessment value. So is that a fair assumption, or do you think it's different for dietary?
That's very true. That's exactly what I was saying. So I totally agree with her.
Okay. So there's an additional, oh, sorry, Jamie, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I wanted to mention, just to complicate everything. So with supplement assessment, we often will use, like I said, the 24-hour recall, but really the inventory method as a gold standard. So the participant brings out all the supplements they've been taking, but even that has not been, I guess, quote unquote, validated in a lot of ways. Like for NHANES, none of this stuff has been validated. The questionnaire used for supplement collection has not been validated. And we kind of think, okay, but it's collecting consistent information for over 20 years. So that kind of, and it's the inventory method, which we regard as pretty much the gold standard. So it must be okay, but still, we haven't done really a study on looking at biomarkers or even compliance, but these are very difficult to do. Because just because someone's bringing you your supplements, did they really take them? And then do people bring you all their supplements? Because a lot of people will say they're not. So some of the ones that might be a little more controversial, they might not necessarily bring out.
Or when they take too many supplements.
Teenagers, right, might not feel comfortable in their home with their parents. They're bringing out some of the muscle builders or the weight loss supplements. So there's a lot of issues that really need more research, and we're definitely kind of behind in that area.
Can I ask you about the issue of timing also there? Because like when you were bringing up some examples, those could be things that are used perhaps not every day or even every week, but for specific periods of time or even time of year. Are those some of those challenges that you've seen?
Yeah. So, if you ask somebody to tell me how the supplements you've taken in the past year, you might capture the seasonal ones or ones that they use when they're sick or have some GI issues, or but then again, it's hard to recall, right, over the past year, everything you took. So a lot of studies use the past 30 days, but like you're saying, for some supplements, they are taken when somebody has some sort of ailment, especially like probiotics. So you might not really capture that usage. So I think, though, with NHANES, you're capturing a lot of the most commonly used or consistently used products, but you might not be getting at those products that are not used every day, right? That are used just certain times of the year, maybe. So there's trade-offs to your, and then the 24-hour recall, asking about supplements in the past day, definitely probably pretty accurate, right? Because person just has to remember the day before. But again, a lot of people, you know, may have missed taking that supplement that day. So you're really not, it's not a good way to really estimate prevalence of use. And then for intake, even when we calculate like total usual intake, it's very complicated with supplements because, you know, if the person took a supplement or not, you're dumping huge amounts of a nutrient all of a sudden into their diet or not. So we struggle with this where you really do need that frequency of use also when doing the usual intake along with the 24-hour recall, because it can be tricky when you're having, you know, all of a sudden 1,200 milligrams of calcium versus not, but the person just missed it that day or doesn't take it every day like that. So to really capture supplements accurately, it requires a lot of work, assessment wise, and a lot of work that a lot of studies can't do. So that's all.
Yeah, that's really interesting to consider all the different issues that are at play. I do see another question about ASA 24, and that is whether or not there is a sleeping questionnaire with the ASA 24. Kirsten, could you comment on that?
Yes, I'd be happy to. That's a fabulous question. Thank you for asking that. Yes, ASA 24 has a sleep module that was released in 2021, I think it is. I don't remember. But we recognized that there is interest in trying to understand this 24-hour cycle and how sleep and diet might interact. So there aren't a lot of tools that capture this, and we figured maybe we could start with ASA 24 and add in a module that could be used in conjunction with either the recall or the record to capture some additional information about sleep. So there is a publication in JAND, and I can see if I can find it in a minute and dump it into the chat. We considered a lot of different tools to think about the best way to getting at this information and have it live within the ASA 24 system. One idea we had been really excited about was to use some sort of visual representation where you could almost integrate the day and talk about food and diet in the whole flow of the day. But having a visual report like that was going to be a big departure from the way ASA 24 works and hasn't been tested. So we had to stick with the traditional pathway of just using questions. So we consulted lots of different sleep questionnaires and tried to think about what we could ask within the context of an eating behavior about sleep behavior, and not ask about sleep, you know, too far back. So the recall has 12 questions and the record has 10. And depending upon how you set up your study, you can look at sleep and how it might impact eating and how eating might impact sleep. So we're very excited about it. We've consulted with some sleep researchers to help develop that questionnaire, and we will soon-ish, I'll say by the end of the summer, be releasing a new code book to assist researchers in developing the types of variables, wake, I'm not going to get any of them right, WASO, a lot of those variables to try and assist in that type of analysis. And I would make a plug for Dr. Marissa Shams-White. She is our sleep expert, and we work a lot together on this particular tool. So I would say shoot her an email if you have specific questions, because she has been at the forefront of developing that tool.
I guess nobody asked about physical activity, but what about that?
What about physical activity? Well, there are lots of ways to get at physical activity. There is Act 24, which is a physical activity recall similar to ASA 24, and that's maintained also by the NCI, different group within NCI. And then there's also a more objective measure of physical activity, something like actigraphy, where you can wear a watch or other sort of physical activity monitor that will provide responses. You know, I think it's pings multiple pings per second, vast amounts of data that you can think about. I mean, Fitbit is a tool that some folks will use. But in the same way that we talk about, you know, it's important to think about the dietary database. Actigraphy has often proprietary algorithms that are used to take all those little bits of data across the day to kind of come up with a summary. And those algorithms are not known to the researcher or to the public, and they can change at the company's whim. So it's important when thinking about those and use in research, you need to understand what you're getting and what you'll be able to do with that information. So it's kind of looking under the hood, things that folks don't often think about. I have a question for dietary supplements and timing. How important is it to capture really detailed information about the actual timing that each supplement was consumed? And is that an area of research that you think needs sorting out for dietary supplements?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be definitely an area of research, especially timing, bioavailability, absorption with the food matrix, so what you're eating in combination. Definitely an area of research for smaller studies. Obviously, larger studies, this is going to be really complicated, but yeah, definitely.
I'm thinking about the move towards precision nutrition and the idea that we can really capture all the intricate reactions that are going on, and knowing when you ate that supplement and compared to when you ate your food and when you slept, all of that information is key. And honestly, I don't know that ASA 24, we certainly haven't validated ASA 24 in terms of timing of eating. I know from looking at some of the timing data that it clumps at half hour and 1 hour. So I don't know if that's good enough for assessment of timing of eating. What is the margin of error? Does it matter if you said you ate it at 8 o'clock and it was really 8:30? And you had your coffee at 8:45?
Right, probably not. I think with supplements, yes, timing, but the bigger picture in timing, not that small, but definitely what you're taking the supplement with, right? Because we know for some nutrients, this can affect absorption. So I definitely think it is an area of research. I don't think you need that level of precision, though. I think for timing in general, outside of the food matrix and what you're eating it with, just having some idea of when it was taken, you know, night versus evening versus morning is probably a big start right there.
It's really interesting to see these commonalities across diet and physical activity and sleep and dietary supplement assessment also related to timing. And there's another question in the chat about whether in ASA 24, the question is asked about why a supplement is taken.
So no, we don't ask that within ASA 24. I think it's a great question. It's included in NHANES. We do know about that within NHANES. We can't do everything, but I think you could probably easily pair that with, you know, a follow-up question, or depending upon how your study was arranged, you could include that. There's a lot of contextual information that we'd like, right? We're just gonna put cameras on everybody and follow them around for days and weeks on end to understand everything that's going on.
That would be great to have that level of detail and not only what, but also when, where, why, and how, and with whom. So we'll look for more assessment tools that can capture some of those other things in the coming years, perhaps. But we're approaching our time here, so I'm looking to Jamie to see should we go ahead at this point and wrap up, or is there anything? Okay, so I really want to say thank you on behalf of everyone here to our two speakers, and also Jamie for your role in the discussion. I think it was a really great questions. So thanks again to all of you who participated as well. And we look forward to tomorrow and seeing you back then. And I'm going to pass it over to Jamie to see if she has any closing comments.
Yeah, so this was a great session. Thank you, Edwina. Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Kirsten. So actually, if anyone wants to go to another breakout session, because the other two actually had 3 speakers, so they'll be going on until 5:30. So I think all you have to do is press that button on the bottom breakout rooms and you can go to another room. Otherwise, we reconvene tomorrow at 11 a.m. and we have a lot of good presentations, and I think one that a lot of people will enjoy on dietary supplement quality with people from industry, FDA, third-party verification companies. So I think it'll be great. So that's it.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.